Senator Budd, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And I thank you for the witnesses for being here today. When I talk to folks from North Carolina, they ask me about this topic a lot. They talk about robocalls and they express their frustrations. Some of them, they don't want to download the app that helps screen these things or pay a few extra dollars for that. So they're frustrated. They want some solutions. When I was in the U.S. House a year ago, I was proud to be an original co-sponsor of the Trace Act, which I think it's making a difference. According to UMail, scam robocall volumes have declined about 55% since their peak in October of 2019. Tools like the Industry Traceback Group and deployed authentication technologies like Stir, Shaken, great name by the way, they better detect spoofing. They seem to be working. So I think we all still agree, however, that there's still a lot of work to do. So Mr. Berku, your written testimony noted that, quote, government and brand imposter calls predominantly originate abroad. These are scams where someone claims to be calling from the IRS regarding back taxes or from the local power company on an overdue bill. These scams are particularly dangerous because they pretend to be communication from important institutions like government agencies, utilities, or from banks. And you're working with the Industry Traceback Group. Have you identified any gaps in federal efforts to prevent illegal scam robocalls that make going after those foreign callers difficult?
Thank you. Yes, it is difficult because they feel they're not going to face justice because they're not based here. They use shell companies, they get kicked off a network and find a new one. So absolutely, we've been very effective in disrupting them. We've seen some of the impact, especially on the robocall side, that the scam volume is way down. But it's one of the reasons, I agree with my colleague here, Megan, that criminal enforcement against these individuals, these groups, it's organized crime abroad doing this is absolutely critical because the only way they're going to stop trying to defraud Americans is they're taken off the board. So we think that's very important.
Thank you. So you mentioned the enforcement agencies. What could some of them do to improve the success rate of stopping these foreign-placed robocalls?
So I think criminal enforcement is key. A few years ago when the Department of Justice, FBI, worked with the Central Bureau of Intelligence in India to raid some of these call centers, government impersonation scams went down almost overnight. So that is key. It's really working with those partners abroad and bringing people to justice, I think, is the key.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, in your testimony, you discussed how the Department of Justice does not sufficiently prioritize prosecuting bad actors who break robocall laws in the attempt to defraud Americans. How does a lack of enforcement action influence efforts to shut down scams and make the cost of illegally robocalling significant enough to dissuade criminals?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think the lack of DOJ enforcement kind of shows that the FCC's efforts really run out of steam if the department's not there to sort of get them across the finish line to actually collect on some of those forfeitures. Similarly, there are open and notorious scammers that seem to me very clearly violating the wire fraud and the mail fraud statutes. And I think sending a message, as Josh was just saying, to whether it's to overseas scammers or domestic scammers, I mean, some of the folks the FCC has brought enforcement actions are right here in the United States. And the department has taken a few actions to bring some cases, but I think they could do far more to send that message that we're not going to tolerate these scams and the fraud that Margot discussed.
Thank you. So how would small businesses who themselves can be victims of these robocalls and illegal scam calls, how would these small businesses benefit from increased DOJ enforcement of the existing laws?
Is that to me, Senator?
Sure.
Great. I think they would benefit in the same ways that consumers would if they are being victimized and they don't have the resources to deploy sophisticated anti-fraud, then sending that message to take, as Josh said, some of these bad actors off the board, I think would be really, really helpful to them in much the same way that consumers are being defrauded.